Have you ever loved someone and knew deep down they never really saw you? Not the version of you that smiled and nodded, not the one that showed up every day like it didn't hurt, but the real you, the one who wrote letters alone at night, the one who said everything without ever saying a word out loud. Tonight I want to take you somewhere few people go, into the kind of silence that screams, into the kind of memory that still shakes your chest when you breathe. Because this story isn't just about me, it's about a letter I never sent, and a name I thought I would never speak out loud. Before we go any further, picture this: a dimly lit room, one window cracked open, letting in just enough light to see the edges of a piece of paper, my hands shaking as I hold the letter, a letter I wrote years ago, a heartbeat pounding like a drum in the background. You don't see a face yet, only the trembling, the tension, the weight of unspoken things. Then it cuts to me. I look you straight in the eye and I ask, what if the person you loved the most never knew it was them? I grew up writing letters, dozens of them. I wrote when I was angry, when I was hopeful. I wrote when I had no one to talk to. But most of all, I wrote about her. And I never, not once, delivered those letters. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much. Because some truths feel too sharp to hand to someone else. And now, years later, I find myself holding one letter I forgot I even wrote. It wasn't fancy, no envelope, just paper that had aged like my silence. And on that paper was the one thing I never thought I'd write. Her name, her real name. Not the nicknames I gave her in poems, not the metaphors I buried in journals, but the actual name I'd whispered in my mind 1,000 times and never dared to say aloud. Emily. She never knew it was about her. Not when I laughed too hard at her jokes. Not when I disappeared the day after she told me about her engagement. Not even when I moved to another city and never explained why. But when I read her name, printed in my own handwriting, everything collapsed. Every wall I built to protect myself cracked. And I remembered, that love, real love, doesn't always need to be returned to leave a mark. Sometimes it just needs to be written. You're going to hear the full story. You're going to see how the tiniest sentence, where just one name, unraveled everything I had spent years trying to hold together. And by the end, you might realize that you've written letters too. Maybe not with ink and paper, but with glances, with pauses, with every "I'm fine" that wasn't. This is not just a story about a girl named Emily. This is about the things we hide, the things we never say, and the people we secretly hope are still listening, even when they never knew it was about them. Stay with me, because what's inside this letter might just sound like something you've been meaning to say too. If any part of this already feels familiar, if you've ever held in your feelings, if you've ever loved someone quietly, then pause for just a moment, hit the like button, subscribe to Unsent Letters, and share this with someone who needs to hear a story that finally says what they couldn't. Let's build a space where our hidden stories finally have a voice, together. I remember exactly when I wrote it. Not the date, that's long gone, but the feeling. It was the middle of October, the kind of cold that doesn't quite reach your skin but settles somewhere deeper, somewhere in your bones. I was sitting on my bedroom floor, lights off, just the glow of my desk lamp hitting the paper, and in that moment, for reasons I still can't fully explain, I started to write, as if it were the last time I'd ever be able to say what I felt. It wasn't planned. I didn't wake up that morning and think, tonight I'll finally tell her. It just happened, like something inside me cracked a little and let the words fall out. But even then, even when it poured out of me so honestly, I knew I wasn't going to give it to her. I had written letters before, many actually, some long, rambling confessions, others just a few sentences that never went anywhere. But this one felt different. It felt final, and maybe that's why it scared me so much. Because once something feels final, it's harder to pretend it doesn't matter. I folded the paper neatly. No envelope, no stamp, just paper, creased, imperfect, fragile, like everything I felt. I slid it into the back of a notebook I never used again, and for years that's where it stayed, buried, silent, unread, and yet somehow louder than anything I ever said to her in person. Why didn't I give it to her? That's the question I've asked myself 1,000 times, and every time I try to answer it, I come back to the same truth. I was afraid. Afraid of what she'd say. Afraid of what she wouldn't say. Afraid that the moment she knew, it would all change. And not in a way I could control. Because that's the thing about unspoken love. It's safe. You get to keep the dream intact. You get to imagine that maybe, If the timing were different, it could have been something. But once you speak it, once it's out there, the dream turns into something else, something real, and real things that they can break. So I stayed silent. I chose distance over disappointment. I chose longing over rejection. I chose her not knowing over me risking everything. You ever do that? You ever hold something so tightly inside yourself because letting it out felt more dangerous than living with the ache? Because I did. I still do sometimes. And I think, no, I know, there are others out there like me. People who feel too much, say too little, and carry entire conversations in their heads that never get spoken aloud. People who fall in love with someone they see every day, but who never really sees them back. That kind of love is not sweet. It's not poetic. It's exhausting. And yet, for a while, it was all I had. So I kept writing, not to be read, but to survive, page after page, year after year, telling myself it was enough just to love quietly. But deep down, even I knew it wasn't. There was a moment, quiet, almost too quiet, where everything I had buried came rushing to the surface. It wasn't planned. I was cleaning out old boxes, trying to declutter a life that had become too heavy with things I didn't want to carry anymore. Old books, high school photos, random receipts from places that didn't even exist now. And then, the notebook. That one notebook I hadn't touched in years. The one I used to hide things in. I almost threw it out without opening it, almost. But something stopped me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe I just wasn't ready to let go of the part of me that still remembered how much it hurt. I opened it slowly, and there it was, folded just like I had left it. That letter, the final one, the one I promised myself I would never look at again. I hesitated. My hands trembled. My breath caught in my throat. And for the first time since writing it, I read it. The words felt foreign and familiar at the same time. My handwriting, my pain, my truth. Line after line, I could see who I used to be. Someone desperate to be heard, but too afraid to make a sound. And then, I saw it. Her name, Emily. Just 5 letters. But reading them felt like being struck by lightning underwater. It was silent, but it shook me from the inside. I stared at the name over and over again, as if it would change, as if maybe I had written something else. But no, it was her. It had always been her. That was the moment everything stopped. No music, no movement, just the echo of my own heartbeat thundering in my ears. Like time had paused to let me sit in the realization I had avoided for years, that I had loved someone so deeply, so completely, and she never even knew. Not really, not fully. I remember staring at the name for what felt like hours. My chest was tight, my mouth dry. There were no tears, not yet, just this overwhelming sense of loss. Not because I didn't have her, but because I never even gave her the chance to know. I had robbed myself of the possibility, and now reading her name felt like digging up a grave I never visited. I whispered it once, Emily, just to hear it in the air, just to know that I could still say it out loud. It didn't bring peace. It didn't bring closure, but it brought truth. And sometimes truth is more terrifying than silence, because truth reminds you of everything you could have done differently. It wasn't about what I felt anymore. It was about what I never let her feel, what I never gave her the space to understand. And I know I'm not alone in this. I know someone watching this has read something that wasn't meant for them, or waited for something that never came, or loved quietly, hoping one day someone would finally hear them. If you've ever cried over something that was never really yours, if you've ever felt invisible in the middle of your own story, leave a comment below that simply says, I existed in silence, because I promise you're not the only one. After reading her name, something inside me shifted. It wasn't immediate, it wasn't dramatic, it was quieter than that. A slow unraveling of everything I thought I had managed to bury. The truth didn't come crashing down. It dripped, painfully, deliberately, through every part of my life I thought had moved on. At first, it was just the silence that hit hardest. I couldn't talk about it to anyone. I didn't know how. How do you bring up a love story no one knew existed? How do you confess to a feeling that never saw the light of day? I carried it alone, like I always had, but now it felt heavier, more real, because now I had proof, her name. Her name in my own handwriting, reminding me that I had once felt something so loud and chosen to stay silent. Everything I looked at began to change. I'd walk into a room and feel disconnected. I'd be surrounded by people, laughing, talking, living, but inside I was somewhere else. I became quieter, not out of shyness, but because I realized how much of my life had been built on hiding parts of myself. I had become so used to withholding, I didn't even know what full honesty looked like anymore. And then came the guilt. Not for loving her, never that, but for never giving her the chance to know, for deciding that I wasn't worth the risk, for making that choice for both of us. What if she would have understood? What if she would have said my name the way I whispered hers into my pillow at night? What if all those years of silence were actually moments of possibility and I let them pass because I was too scared of the answer? The regrets piled up quietly, the way I avoided eye contact that last time I saw her, the way I never asked how she really felt, the way I let her walk away thinking I was indifferent, when in truth I was drowning in words I never spoke. And yet, even in the pain there was clarity, because when everything falls apart inside you, you start to see what actually matters. You start to question the way you've lived, and you realize you don't want to keep choosing silence over connection. You don't want to keep pretending you're fine when you're not. You don't want to let another person walk out of your life without knowing the weight they carried in your heart. We all have things we wish we'd said, all of us. Letters we wrote and deleted, conversations we rehearsed but never started, moments we let slip because we were afraid of the unknown. But what I learned, painfully, slowly, is that unspoken truths don't disappear. They just sit inside you, echoing, and eventually they demand to be heard. I started to change, not all at once, but I began noticing the lies I told myself to feel safe. I started listening to my own silence. I started recognizing how often I smiled to hide the ache. And I realized I didn't want to be that version of myself anymore. I didn't want to keep loving in secret. I wanted to be seen, fully, honestly, even if it meant risking everything. And that's when the memory returned. Something she once said, years ago. She once told me, in a moment so small I almost forgot it, I just wish someone would really see me. Not the version I pretend to be, but me. And for years I thought about that sentence as just something people say when they're tired or lost. But after reading her name on that letter, after sitting with every unsent word, I realized maybe that was the moment she was asking for something I never had the courage to give. Maybe she wasn't just talking to the world, maybe she was talking to me. That letter wasn't just ink on paper, it was a mirror, a reflection of a version of myself I didn't let anyone see, not even her. It was my soul, cracked open, whispering, please notice me. And yet I kept it hidden. I told myself stories to justify it. She wouldn't care, it wouldn't change anything, she's moved on. But the truth, I was terrified, because admitting how I felt meant accepting how much I had lost. We all carry these invisible stories, some filled with regret, others with longing, all of them stitched together by silence. We walk through our days pretending we've healed, pretending we've let go, pretending we never cared that deeply in the first place. But then, something happens. A letter, a name, a memory, and it all comes rushing back. And suddenly, we're staring at the parts of ourselves we worked so hard to forget. But here's what I learned. Silence doesn't protect you. It preserves pain. Keeping that letter hidden didn't save me from heartbreak. It guaranteed it. All those years I thought I was shielding myself. I was just delaying the moment I'd have to face what I felt. And when that moment came, it didn't ask for permission. It just arrived, with a name, with a memory, and with the weight of everything I never said. If you're listening to this now and you've been holding something in, a truth, a feeling, a name, I want you to know something. You deserve to let it out. You deserve to be seen, heard, and known for who you really are. Not the version you edit, not the one that plays it safe. The real you, the one who writes letters in the dark, hoping one day they'll find their way to someone who understands. Because sometimes, just saying the name changes everything. And even if they never read it, even if they never respond, there's still power in the saying, there's healing in the release, and there's courage in the choosing to speak, choosing to feel, choosing to live without pretending it didn't matter. This isn't the end of the story. In my next video, I'm going to share something even harder, a story about someone who received a letter that wasn't meant for her, and how, years later, she uncovered a truth that shattered everything she thought she knew. It's raw, it's complicated, and it might make you rethink every goodbye you've ever said too soon. If this story stirred something in you, if you've ever lived with a truth you were too afraid to say, subscribe to this channel. Turn on notifications. Share this video with someone you think needs to hear it. Someone who writes in silence, someone who hides behind smiles, someone who's still waiting to be seen. And before you go, tell me in the comments, have you ever written a letter you never sent? Type, I have a letter I never delivered. Or if this made you feel seen, just write, "I felt this. Let's talk about it. Let's not carry it alone." Thank you for staying with me until the end, for letting yourself feel this. If you made it this far with a lump in your throat or tears in your eyes, tap the like button. Leave a comment and tell me what this story brought up for you, even if it's just a word, a memory, or a name you've never said out loud. Subscribe for more stories like this, stories that don't just speak, they reach. And please, share this video. Because somewhere out there, someone's carrying a letter they never delivered. And maybe this is what gives them the courage to open it.